This is Kentucky's Voice Radio, covering the latest state and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
And you are here on Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host for the day, Andrew Cooprider. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, whoa. I already had a dose of Andrew Cooprider on Kentucky Voice on Tuesday. Are you telling me I get it again today? And the answer is, yeah, you are. And I don't even have a guest today. You're just getting raw, mostly unfiltered Andrew Cooprider delivered to your ears today. And if you're like, look, I like what he's got to say, I want to hear more. Well, you can tune into Kentucky's Voice tomorrow and hear me again. And then if you're still like, that's not enough, Cooprider, I need more, give me more, well, you can tune in on Saturday. We here at Kentucky's Voice, all the hosts and myself, are doing a special dealing with Fancy Farm. Those speeches start at 2 p.m. I'll be down in Fancy Farm. That's out in western Kentucky there, far away. I'll be down there live on the ground doing interviews, talking to people, getting reactions, covering that for you. And then our other hosts will be back here in the studio covering that. And then if you're still like, I need more Coop, give it to me. Well, you can tune into the Andrew Cooprider Show right here, 6 p.m. on Sundays on 970, and you can watch it Wednesdays at 11 o'clock on WBNA. I'll have on Senate candidate Michael Ferris. We'll be discussing his race and digging into that. Speaking of elections today, I'm going to be covering the Senate race and 6th Congressional race and kind of digging in a little bit more into those races. I do that from time to time. I always mention them normally in my general show. I'll pass through them, but it's because they're so incredibly important. I mean, this is, McConnell retiring. This is going to be the major race we're going to have in an open seat primary for the Senate for probably at least the next 8 years. I based upon his behavior, I'm assuming Rand Paul is going to be running for re-election again here. That election should be coming up in 2028. So we'll have him. And then this seat, whoever runs is, of course, going to run for, I'm going to assume, run for another term as well. So it's a big, important race, but also because Andy Barr is running for the Senate, you have the 6th Congressional race going on. And that is a very interesting race as well. And I've mentioned it in passing, but I haven't really dug into it. And I tell you what, I got to take a moment to just kind of talk about these three candidates so far that have jumped in. So first we have Ralph Alvarado. So Ralph was a state senator from Central Kentucky. He then left 2-ish years ago. Now, look, there was a little bit of drama, too, when he left. So for those of you who don't remember 2021 legislative session quite as vividly as I do, because it's very important, it was the legislative session, the first time the legislators gotten back into office since COVID had hit, and they were reacting to Bashir's craziness, lockdowns, madness, tyranny, arresting people for going to churches, crazy things. And in that, there was a bill to ban vaccine mandates for government and some employers, and just to make sure the COVID vaccine can't be mandated on citizens. Now, there was some arguments about this. The original bill form, I believe it was House Bill 21 at the time. It was sponsored by Savannah Maddox. At the time, it extended to private businesses, and there's an argument to be had. Some people would say that it is anti-freedom to tell private businesses they couldn't mandate the vaccine. Some people would say we need to do it because they're violating individuals' medical rights. My opinion on it was that normally it would be anti-freedom, slippery slope, whatever you want to call it, to mandate that private employers can't mandate the vaccine, to pass a law saying they can't mandate it. Double mandate there in that last sentence. Does that cancel each other out? Anyways, but my response to that would be the problem is when government is manufacturing a culture. In this case, during COVID, government was using things like tax rebates from the federal government. You actually got a tax credit for up to 3 weeks of salary for every single one of your employees that was vaccinated. And if it surpassed your tax liability to the federal government, they'd cut you a check. That's a pretty big incentive, of course. Additionally, you had situations like here in Kentucky, you had Georgetown Hospital during that whole forcing nurses to get the COVID vaccine. Georgetown Hospital came out and said that they would not mandate their nurses, mandate their medical employees to go ahead and get the vaccine. And then Dr. Stack came down on them and told them, no, you need to stop running those ads. And of course, because we are a certificate of need state, it makes it very difficult on hospitals if the current administration doesn't like them too much. And so they did stop running those ads. They stopped advertising it. And so government was already using their power to manufacture an environment where private employers were mandating vaccines because of government coercion. So how do you undo that? And my opinion was we have to pass this law saying you can't mandate the vaccine because we have to undo that which has been manufactured by our government in the first place, using our tax dollars to do so, in order to return to a baseline of freedom of choice, I guess you could say. We have to undo that. Well, the bill that ended up, though, making it over to the Senate was a bill that only dealt with government employers and universities and university hospital systems, etc. And Alvarado was the chair of the Senate committee that then heard this bill. And behind the scenes, I'm told, he killed this bill. He did everything he could to kill this bill. And he went ahead and brought it forward for a vote after it had died. He let everybody else vote. After everybody had voted and the bill didn't pass, he then decided he would vote yes, but not before he chastised the bill sponsor, Savannah Maddox, for not generating enough support from the senators on the committee itself. He's like, normally you should generate more support. She didn't do that. Go to him individually. Because, of course, you don't vote for a bill just because you support a bill. You only vote for a bill because the legislator sponsoring it you like. Because that's how it works. It's not about whether it's good or bad. That's how it works. So Alvarado kind of became known amongst, I guess you call it the Liberty Republican crowd, the conservative Republican crowd, talking about the Maddoxes, the Doans, the Proctors, the Roberts, that kind of group of people, the Rawlings, as persona non grata. They know what he did to kill that bill. And shortly after, he left and went to Tennessee to be the health commissioner there. But he's back. Guess who's back? Back again. Senator Ralph Alvarado, retired, is back. And this time, he's running for Congress. So we have him. We also have Deanna Frazier Gordon. She's a state house rep, current state house rep. Not a super well-known name. She's been pretty quiet. I guess she's also in the medical field and has built up a pretty hefty practice. There's some speculation she's got some wealth behind her. I've heard some politicos speculate she'll throw in as much as $1 million. I didn't even know she had $1 million, but apparently politicos think she's got $1 million of her own money that she's willing to throw into this race. We'll be able to see when the fundraising reports come out here in about 2.5 months or so on that congressional race and see where she's at. And then we also have Ryan Dotson. Now, he's the only one we've seen a financial report for. He's raised right around $100,000 so far. 60-ish thousand of it has come from himself. And so that obviously points to some issues of how competitive can you be if you can't fundraise the money. But he's the only one that was declared at the time this fundraising report came out. He is also a current state house rep. So all three of these have something in common. They're all running for Congress, of course, but they all were in the state legislature. And they were all in the state legislature in 2021. And if you ask them, they're all going to tell you they are the Trumpiest Trumpers to have ever trumpeted. In fact, when Alvarado announced he was running, he made sure to mention he was the only Latino, yeah. Hispanic? We're going to go with Latino. I think he's Cuban. I don't know. Anyways, he was the only Latino to speak for Trump at the RNC. He made sure to make that known. He wanted that to be clear, using that identity politics Right off the bat, always shows you just how conservative people are when they're using their identity politics when they launch. Which, can we stop that? I remember when Nikki Haley launched. She's like, I'm woman, hear me roar. I'm the best woman to have ever womaned. I am alpha woman. And it's just, if you're going to run as a conservative, stop talking about your race. Stop talking about your gender. Those are talking points for the left. If you're running as a conservative, talk like a conservative. I know for some of you that's hard, because you're not really conservative. And you don't speak the jargon. And we know you're not really conservative because you do talk about your identity politics, but at least get smart enough to not do it anymore, please. It's almost insulting to my intelligence. You know, as a commentator on politics, having to watch these people lie to my face and know they're lying just based upon the words they're choosing and think I'm so stupid, I'm not going to catch it. It insults my intelligence. Don't do it anymore. Just stop. Anyways. So they all were legislators in 2021, which is really important because if you remember, they're also going to tell you that they are the most conservative, hardcore, MAGA, anti-DEI candidate to have ever candidated. Okay? They are definitely against the DEI. They're definitely not for the Black Lives Matter movements and all those other things. And it's important you remember they were legislators in 2021 because that is the legislative year not only of COVID, but of Black Lives Matter. You see, that was the big blow up here, of course, in Louisville after the Breonna Taylor incident, George Floyd. And that was the legislation session after that. And how did they react to the Black Lives Matter pressure? All three of them. If they're going to sit here and tell me they're running as super duper ooper conservatives, if they're going to sit there and tell me they're anti-DEI, if they're going to tell me they're the best one, well, they better have a voting record to back that up. But all three of them have a problem on that front. And we'll be covering exactly what that is after this short break. You're listening to Andrew Cooperrider here, covering today on Kentucky's Voice. If you want to follow me on social media, feel free to check me out at KY Cooperrider on X. Search on Facebook, Andrew Cooperrider. But we'll be back in a few short minutes to go over their voting records. We'll see you here in a bit.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And you're back here on Kentucky's Voice, your host for the day, Andrew Cooperrider. We're digging into the 6th Congressional District. I've leading into this talking about the 3 candidates running, how they all say they're the most conservative conservatives to have ever conservatived. But before I dig down into why they all are dirty, no good, rotten liars, if you want to reach out to the show, you want to join the conversation, feel free to shoot us a text message at 502-571-0970. Once again, that is 502-571-0970. Please text me with your thoughts. I want to hear from you. I will read them out on air, assuming that they don't offend me personally. So only positive things, really. That's all I want to hear from you. Anyway, so digging into it now. So they, Ralph Alvarado, Deanna Frazier Gordon, Ryan Dotson, all running for that 6th congressional race. They're all going to tell you they're anti-DEI. They're all going to tell you they're anti-BLM. They're all going to tell you they're the most conservative people in the world. And look, I want them all to come on the show and talk to me at some point. I'm not pointing out any particular person. I'm not in the camp of any particular person, as you're going to find out here. But they're all not being really honest with you. And I want to tell you about a little commission we have here. And I'm going to wrap this back around. Okay, so bear with me. Bear with me. So we have this committee here in Kentucky called the Commission on Race and Access to Equal Opportunity. This is a statutory committee. We'll go over what that means in a second. And a few weeks ago, they actually held a hearing where the subject about Black business owners facing barriers in business came up. And I'm going to play here the policy recommendations they made before the committee, what they say the government should do about Black businesses. Go ahead and play clip 1 here.
Even now, with a proven track record, navigating capital remains a challenge. It is not that we can't access capital, it's that the terms, the opportunities, and the risk tolerance often shift. We've been fortunate to have, I didn't pay him for this. He said we're fortunate to have a good banker like yourself, but in most instances, we still have to prove our worth and with different agencies. There's a sense that black-owned businesses must be bulletproof just to get the same consideration as others receive with an idea and a handshake. So he wrote down some policy recommendations: culturally informed underwriting, create incentive programs for banks and CDIFs to use community-rooted or relationship-based underwriting models, especially for early-stage businesses led by people of color. Public-private matching grants, establish programs that match private capital raised by diverse founders with state-backed grants or non-interest loans, especially with those with a proven track record and job creation potential. Supplier diversity and enforcement expansion, and mentorship linked capital access. This particular company is doing business revenues between 10 and 20 million. He told me I can share that. So as you can see, you would think that they wouldn't be going through some of the same problems, but they still are. And I can attest to that because he's a good friend of mine as well. But I wanted to read that because no matter.
So there you go. There was the policy recommendations, the assertion made by that guy, for those who didn't catch it. And he was a banker with Commerce Lexington, testifying before a legislative committee here in Kentucky, the 80% Republican legislature here in Kentucky, about how black-owned businesses are treated differently than white-owned. That, of course, white privilege allows white business owners like myself to get funding on an idea and a handshake. Now, I don't know about you. I don't know about you other business owners as far as that go, but no bank has ever loaned me money because I had a good idea and a firm handshake and the right skin color. For some reason, they didn't pull up my credit, look at my financials, and say, no, we can't approve you. And then me say, oh, hold on. I must have forgot to click the box. I'm white. So, come on. And they're like, oh, our apologies, fellow white sir. Let's just write you this check right now. What terms do you want? 0% APR? Because remember, that's what that guy was asking for. He was asking for black-owned businesses to be allowed special loans at 0% APR backed by the state government. I've never been offered a 0% APR loan because I was white. Never happened. No, instead, they still had to pull my credit. They still had to look at my financials. Did I have a blind banker? Is that what it was? The banker I was talking to must have been blind. He was unaware of my skin color. Was there a special number? Is there a white business owner only number to call at these banks to get these special whites only loans that they're offering that apparently the black community, as this guy was testifying about, doesn't have access to? No, of course not. These policy recommendations are ridiculous. Not only are they ridiculous, but they're also unconstitutional and illegal. The government cannot treat people differently based upon their skin color. You're not allowed to do that. They cannot offer a special grant and loan program, but only for you if you have the right hue to your color or the right gender. They have to treat everybody equally, because if they don't treat everybody equally, if they don't go ahead and treat people the same regardless of their race or gender, what ends up happening is the state government would be acting in a racist manner. And of course, we don't want our government to be racist. So this is a committee led by Republicans. How did the Republicans respond? How did they say they would do here about these recommendations? Did they laugh at them? Did they point to the door and say, out of here with those racist, illegal ideas? Well, let's look at clip 2 here and see how Senator Amanda Bledsoe responded to those recommendations.
Representatives and public servants in Fayette County, not just serving minorities, but serving the city really well. And so I was grateful to have you all here and share some of the amazing work that we're doing, honestly, in Fayette County. And I'm glad you shared that. If you wouldn't mind sharing it so I can share it with the group, take out personal. So that's a good list of things to think about. And last summer, we did talk about some of those same challenges with relationships and access to capital. In a similar vein, you touched.
Well, there you go. Those are swell ideas. Actually, could you distill it down so I could share it better? Because those are such great ideas. I want to tell others about them. That's how a Republican senator responded, the chair of the committee. Now, this is a statutory committee. What does that mean? right? So there's a few different committees in our legislature. Statutory means it's formed by law. It exists not temporarily, but a law was passed for it. Now, you could create a temporary fact-finding committees. Those are normally formed with resolutions to meet in the interim that come out of the legislature, and then to create a report to report back with policy ideas to the legislature. Those are temporary. You have joint interim committees. That's where during the session, for example, take education. So during the session, there's an education committee in the House, education committee over in the Senate. During the joint, they come together and form one joint interim committee that then hears about education issues. They meet about once a month, having hearings on education issues. So that way, when they come back, well, they can come back into session, they are kind of prepared and they have some idea of what each other's doing and what they want to focus on. They're able to prep for the next session. So those come up. So statutory committees are very important. You know, some other statutory committees are things like the Government Contract Review Committee, a committee that was created in order to approve spending that went on within the state. These are what they view as extensions of the legislature, where they want them to approve of what the government's doing. Another one would be the Government Regulation Committee that looks at government regulations and decides whether or not they like them, and then can, when it comes into session, create bills, laws, and things to get rid of regulations they don't like. But this is a statutory committee. A statutory committee that was formed in 2021. Now, if you remember, I was talking about our people running for Congress that are the most conservative to have ever conservatived: Ralph Alvarado, Deanna Frazier Gordon, and Ryan Dotson. And if you remember, they were all legislators in 2021 when this clearly racist, pro-DEI, pro-BLM bill to form this committee was passed in the first place. And how'd they vote on it? Well, in order to get that information, you'll have to tune right back in here. We're coming up on a break here on Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host for the day, Andrew Cooperrider. If you like what I'm saying, you're like, I got to get a dose. Another dose of that guy. Well, you can tune in here tomorrow on Kentucky's Voice. I'm doing a show there. And then also Fancy Farm live. Tune in here on WBNA. Tune in here on 970 AM on Saturday. Catch that live. I'll be on the ground doing interviews. We'll be back in a few short minutes.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at KY-voice.org.
And you're back here on Kentucky's Voice. Host for the day, Andrew Cooperrider. Before the break, I was talking about the Statutory Commission on Race and Access to Equal Opportunity, the commission that apparently hears from black business owners about how they need special government treatment and then tells them that's a really, really swell idea. That's super great. We should implement those ideas of, treating people differently based upon their skin color. Now, if you want to join into the conversation, you have opinions you want to say, go ahead and text us at 502-571-0970. Once again, that's 502-571-0970. That's to join into the conversation. But going back into it, so I mentioned this statutory committee. That means it was formed by law. A law passed in 2021. Now, I was talking about the 6th congressional race. It's got Ralph Alvarado, Deanna Frazier Gordon, and Ryan Dotson in it. And so how did they vote in 2021 when this committee was formed? Well, this committee was formed from a Senate Bill 10 from 2021, and the major group behind it lobbying was called Anti-Racism KY. Now, y'all, this was in the wake of BLM. So anybody supporting this was not, they literally were not smart enough to realize that this was a liberal talking point, that conservatives would reject the notions of things like anti-racism KY, that would reject the notions of defund the police, would reject the notions that we live in a systematic racist society, because that's what anti-racism means. Still, they're just not as popular. It meant it was this assertion that our government is in and of itself racist. Our systems, our structure, the way we're set up in this country was built upon racism, is still racist to this day. And so therefore, minorities are naturally treated differently than white people. And so it's not enough to just not be racist. We must be actively anti-racist. We have to create policies that give a leg up to minorities and treat them differently than white people in order to undo the racism, because our systems are literally racist, even though they themselves have no law treating people differently based upon their race, but they were built by white people. So therefore, they're racist. That was the entire assertion. And Republicans, by and large, in our state legislature in 2021, bought into this hook, line, and sinker, while the rest of us were smart enough to realize that this isn't conservative, this isn't Republican, this is anti-constitutional, this is illegal, this goes against the civil rights, you can't do this. And so these three legislators now wanting your vote in the 6th congressional race, how'd they vote? Well, only one Republican voted against this in the Senate. That was Senator Schickel. He's now out of office. He was replaced by Rawlings. Rawlings, pretty good guy. I don't think Rawlings would have voted for it either. Every other Republican other than Senator Carpenter voted yes on this bill, including, you guessed it, Senator Ralph Alvarado, who's now running in that 6th congressional race and swears up and down he's a super duper duper uber strong conservative that hates DEI. Then in the House, 24 voted no, 11 abstained from voting. So they were there. They just were like, I'm not going to vote. And it still passed with 64 yes votes. So who voted yes? Well, other 6th District congressional candidate, Ryan Dotson, did, of course. He voted yes on this piece of pro-BLM legislation. And while Frazier Gordon didn't vote yes, she did take the coward's way out and just did not vote. But at least you let her off the hook and say, well, at least she didn't vote yes. You know when she did vote yes, though, was to suspend the rules. You see, whenever you hear about a rule suspension vote going on, it means that a bill has violated their already laid out rules for how they will pass a bill. In this case, it deals with timing. So it has to be out of committee and receive 2 floor readings by title before it can be passed. I believe that's the rule. So it's about 3 days. So it gives legislators a couple of days to be able to research bills before they come forward. But legislators can take a vote to suspend the rules to allow the bill to come forward for a vote. And this is an interesting tactic that establishment Republicans will use in order to avoid voting on something they really know their constituents don't agree with, to avoid voting on something that they know maybe they don't agree with, or avoid voting something on something they think that will get them removed from office. They don't want it on their voting record, but they do want the goodwill of the establishment. So they'll go ahead and do the procedural vote to allow the bill to come forward. The first hurdle that you have to cross in order to pass these kinds of pieces of legislation. And they have to pass them quick, because if you knew in 2021 they were voting to create a BLM-inspired committee on race and access to equal opportunity, you would have been livid, I'm sure. As you're listening to this now, you're like, what are these so-called Republicans doing? What are they doing here? Why hasn't this been repealed yet? We know better now for sure. You would think they would go ahead and vote on this. You think out of concern that they would end up becoming, the Republican on this committee, having to hear these kinds of things and then respond with, yes, that sounds like a great idea. Out of fear of having that on your record, this committee would be gone away with, but it still exists. And so Frazier Gordon did take the vote to allow it to move forward. So it's not just a coward's way. I'd call it almost worse. Like, you knew enough to know that the bill was bad. You knew enough to know you didn't want to vote for the bill because it wasn't conservative, but you didn't have enough courage of your convictions to do everything you could to stop it, including not voting to suspend the rules, voting no on suspending the rules to stop it at every step you could. Now, instead, you voted yes, so you could curry the favor of the establishment of leadership, but you still get to have your opportunity to vote no. So, obviously, this isn't an attack on any specific candidate. I'm making a point. I still hope all of them come on to talk to me about this race, because they all got hit in the crossfire here. Nobody was spared. But I do have to call it as I sees it, that when people, really most, if not all politicians run, they will be very long on rhetoric. They will fill you full of cookies and rainbows. They will promise you the conservative moon and say, maybe you'll get the stars too. If you're lucky, play your cards right. I might give you the stars too. They'll promise you everything, but they will be short on action. They'll talk a big game, but will they have the courage of their convictions? Probably not. Anyways, moving over to the Senate now. If the Senate candidates were listening like, whew, thank goodness he's not covering us today. You're in trouble. I'm doing you too. You're coming up. So we've got big Fancy Farm coming up this weekend. So we should prep ourselves because these candidates will be speaking at Fancy Farm. Fancy Farm has on every statewide, whether it's a statewide constitutional office like our auditors, agriculture commissioner, governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, etc. They'll also have anybody running statewide. So like during 2023, they had Cameron and Bashir. The prior year, 2022, if you were declared running for governor and you hit certain criteria, they'd have you on. Well, Nate Morris, Daniel Cameron, and Andy Barr will all be at Fancy Farm. And so we should kind of talk about what's going on in that race in order to prep us for it. So first, let's start off with the Nate Morris campaign. Nate Morris has picked up the Bernie Moreno endorsement. That's the senator from Ohio. He also has Senator Jim Banks' endorsement. Of course, I believe Donald Trump Jr. has endorsed him, as well as Charlie Kirk. So he's racking up some pretty big endorsements. A lot of this has to do with, I believe that he's pretty good friends with J.D. Vance. And J.D. Vance probably certainly helped the Bernie Moreno thing happen. I guess they know each other from the venture capital world. A few days ago, Nate Morris was actually on Fox Business. This is going to be on clip 3. He was on Fox Business with Charlie Kirk discussing about immigration. That's been a hot topic after Andy Barr stepped in a Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
So, Nate, taking out the trash in Washington, D.C. is being demanded by the voters of Kentucky and across the country. Besides replacing the Republican McConnell establishment in Kentucky, you also said that you are pledging to deport every single illegal immigrant in America. Very quick comment on that.
Well, Charlie, our country's been in a crisis because of the border. And thank goodness for President Trump, who sealed our border. And the next step we have to take is we have to have this moratorium. We have to deport every single one of Joe Biden's 20 million illegals that have invaded our country. And we can have no new immigration until they all go back. We're full. We're absolutely full. And the amnesty that's being pushed now by Republicans and Democrats is treasonous. Amnesty is treason. And we have to remember that. If we don't have a border, we don't have a country. And it's America that's at stake, but it's also Western civilization. If America goes, the hope of the world is gone.
Nate Morris, thank you for your time. You have a big task ahead of you. It's the first time that Senate race has been open since 1984.
And so that was Nate Morris talking big on illegal immigration and legal immigration. What he was saying there is that he wants a moratorium on legal immigration until the illegal immigration is under control, that the illegal immigrants we have are deported and getting out of here. Now, what's funny is he has that position. Andy Barr, in an attempt to compare and contrast, this came up a few weeks ago. I mentioned this on my show, the Andrew Cooper Show, that Andy Barr fell into an calling those who are hawkish on not just illegal immigration, but legal immigration, saying, hey, look, we need to take care of Americans first. We need to take care of America first. Once every American that wants a job has a job, once we get rid of these illegal immigrants and that's taken care of, then we can talk about legal immigration. Well, Andy Barr called those people nativists. So there you go. That was a trap, I guess, or a pothole Barr fell into. I'm sure he wishes he didn't say that. Nate Morris is in that interview, voice sounding a little rough there. Probably has to do with the fact he actually had a child recently. I believe just this month had a child, so congratulations on that. Now, speaking of Andy Barr, we're going to be going over his campaign and Cameron's campaign After this short break, they're going to be gearing up for Fancy Farm themselves. That's an interesting kind of dichotomy there. Nate Morris, where he is a political outsider, he may not be as familiar with Fancy Farm as somebody like Andy Barr or Daniel Cameron. Of course, Andy Barr hasn't ever spoke, I believe, at Fancy Farm. I don't remember him ever speaking. Cameron, on the other hand, has spoken at Fancy Farm, 5-6 times. He's kind of a veteran of doing it. It's definitely an interesting and different environment. And if you've never attended Fancy Farm, never heard anything going on about it, you're like, what's the big deal? You should tune in right here on 970, right here on WBNA on Saturday. Speeches start at 2 p.m. We'll have coverage before that, though. I'll be live on the ground, getting interviews, talking to people. You'll be hearing the chanting, the screaming, the yelling. It gets very, very loud there. People get a little crazy. There's heckling, politicians making fun of each other. If you want to hear the jokes, it's a good place to tune into. But after this break, we'll be talking about Andy Barr. We'll be talking about Daniel Cameron's campaign, where it's situated at, where it's sitting at, leading into this Fancy Farm weekend. You're listening to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host for the day, Andrew Cooperrider. We'll be back in a few short minutes.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And you're back here in this final segment on a wonderful, wonderful Thursday. It's wonderful because you're listening to me on Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host for the day, Andrew Cooperrider. If you want to join into the conversation, you can shoot us a text message, 502-571-0970. And if you're looking around and you're like, I like this show, I like Andrew, I want to make sure I see him more, I want to hear him more, I want him to have job security, well, you can donate here to Kentucky's Voice by texting KY Voice to 53555. That is 53555. That's 1513, then 35. So 53555. Text KY Voice. Before the break, we were talking about the Senate race leading here into Fancy Farm. They're all going to have a big debut this weekend. We're going to be covering that closely right here on 970, right here on WBNA. And so I was talking about Nate Moore's campaign before the break, dealing into now Barr's campaign, gearing up here for Fancy Farm. In clip 4, he's going to be announcing and talking about how he's preparing for Fancy Farm. Daniel Cameron's doing the same thing, preparing to Fancy Farm. I haven't seen anything out of Nate Morris, though, about running buses or anything else. Let's hear what Andy Barr has to say, what he's gearing up for, clip 4.
Hey, this is Congressman Andy Barr, chairman of President Donald Trump's 2024 primary campaign in Kentucky and America First fighter in the United States House of Representatives. Join my winning campaign for a tradition like none other in Kentucky, Fancy Farm. This coming Saturday, we've got buses leaving from Somerset, London, and Lexington. Sign up on the link below and join us in our winning campaign for U.S. Senate with barbecue and great political speeches.
Real quick, he just said, what did he say? He said he was Donald Trump's primary campaign director or whatever for Kentucky. He's got to plug that in there, right? Because really right now, Cameron, Nate, Andy Barr here, they're all really running a campaign for one right now, and that's to get Donald Trump's endorsement. But another thing he said there was he was America First champion in Congress. America First champion. I'm just curious, just wondering, how does voting to send billions of dollars to Ukraine make you America First? I don't know. Andy Barr says it is, though. So, I guess we just have to trust what he says. So there he is. He's gearing up there, campaigning for Donald Trump's endorsement. Barr's whole campaign right now is based on Donald Trump. I've said it before. I think this is like a really risky move on his part because literally, so the deadline to file to run for election here in Kentucky is early January. It's like January 3rd, 4th, 5th, somewhere in there. I don't know. Early January. If I was better at this, I would have looked that up beforehand. But anyways, I just know it's early January. And so he is come early January, he's stuck in that Senate race. He can't back out and then decide he wants to run again for Congress. Now, is he going to ever make that decision to run for Congress instead? Unless Donald Trump comes to him and is like, I will not, no way, no how, I'm endorsing you at all, ever. I hate you. Go away. Unless he said something like that, there's no way Andy Barr is going to end up not running for the Senate, in my opinion. And part of it has to do with the fact his time has kind of come to an end in Congress. He was running to be chair of the Financial Services Committee in the House this past Congress, I guess you'd call it, after the last election. And so he's running to be chair of the Financial Services Committee and got passed over. Now, I have talked to a few of my contacts in Congress about what happened there. I'm told that they just hated his staff. I'm told that his staff doesn't get along well with people, which indicates something about your hiring ability, which, I mean, that kind of lines up with it makes sense. It makes sense because even here locally, I've heard a lot of people saying that the staff is a little uppity, a little full of themselves. Okay. But regardless, we have the Barr campaign is desperately trying to go ahead and pull in that Trump endorsement. If he doesn't get the Trump endorsement, his campaign kind of falls apart. But you know, that's a gamble you got to make. And so he's been swinging hard at Nate Morse. He thinks Nate Morse is his greatest barrier to getting that endorsement. He believes that Trump is no way, no how going to endorse Cameron because Cameron lost against Andy Bashir. Now, while Donald Trump may or may not be forgiving to quote unquote losers, whatever you want to call it, it is not true with the general elected. We've seen Kari Lake, Donald Trump himself. We've seen several candidates that have lost elections, general elections, primary elections, and then were able to come back and win. So I don't know. The general electorate doesn't maybe as much care, but Donald Trump, they believe will. So they're not really attacking Daniel Cameron as much because he's campaigning for that Trump endorsement. And he thinks Nate Morse is going to be his biggest barrier to getting that done. And so he's coming out swinging at Nate, calling him out for his behavior he's had in running private business, you know, the pro-DEI, pro-liberal kind of ideology side of things. We've talked about this before on my show. I've talked about this before where he was playing the game. He's playing the game. He was playing the corporate game. You're being traded on a public market. He was on the stock market. He took a company up to $1 billion. And unfortunately, that's something that happened in his past, and he's also donated to Mitch McConnell. Nate Morse has. He's donated to Mitch McConnell, donated to Nikki Haley, and Andy Barr's been calling him out for that, which is a little rich coming from Andy Barr, considering he called McConnell his mentor, but I think less than a year ago. But you know, it's a campaign. I get it. You're trying to draw that dichotomy there, but his desire for that Donald Trump endorsement is literally controlling everything he does. I was at an event. I was at a GOP picnic last weekend, and I had to leave early. But while I had to leave early, somebody else there actually went up and asked Andy Barr about his support for Thomas Massey's bill or resolution on releasing the Epstein files, releasing all the information they have on Epstein and why that's important. And his response was that he would talk to the White House about joining that resolution. He would talk to, essentially it was, I'll talk to Trump and see if I can do that. And while I understand you have to make deals with the White House when you're passing legislation, especially because they can veto it. So you do have to come to an agreement there. Your decision on whether or not to even support a bill in the first place, your decision to sponsor a bill, your decision to vote yes or no on something should be driven mainly by your constituents, not driven by if Donald Trump agrees with it or not. And the excuse here would be, well, Donald Trump won the presidential election, so the American people want you to vote for everything Donald Trump is doing. And I don't think that would be accurate to say. I hear that conversation all the time. But I just, one, if Donald Trump is doing something that he didn't run on doing, then I would disagree with you. You know, for an example, Rand Paul putting forward a bill to take away tariffing policy from Donald Trump. Donald Trump literally ran on tariffing countries. He meant it. So I would disagree with Rand there. I'd say, look, I mean, the American people voted for this tariff thing. That's what they liked. That's what they voted for. That's what they decided. They knew that's what they were getting from Trump. While you may not like it, you may disagree with it, so on and so forth. That is what the American people voted for. However, if the American people voted for clarity and the release of the Epstein files, which real quick, they put out a memo saying investigation closed, but now we've had more action. For the first time ever, DOJ has actually talked to Ghislaine Maxwell on the Epstein case, despite the fact that they said case closed like a month ago. Weird. But anyways, but people voted for a transparency on those issues. So it'd be inaccurate to say the American people voted for the hiding and the case closing of the Epstein case without any clarity because Trump says that that's what he wants. I don't think Trump even really wants that. I think it's what his advisors in his ear are kind of leading him the wrong way. But that would be inaccurate. The people voted for clarity on Epstein. That's what they voted for. And so that's what Andy Barr should be supporting. But he's wrapped up now in getting that endorsement from Trump. Well, moving on to the Cameron campaign. Now, Cameron and Andy Barr are both, as I said priorly, running buses for Fancy Farm. This is something candidates do. Cameron's running one from Louisville and E-Town. Cameron was born in Elizabethtown, so it makes some sense there. And then Andy Barr's running them from Lexington and Somerset. And that is kind of interesting because it gives you a little bit of insight about where they think their base of support is and where they think it's not. Because Andy Barr's not running one out of Louisville. Cameron is, which is just kind of fascinating. Anyways, so they're both running buses. The other thing I noticed as I was looking through the different campaigns is that both Andy Barr, Nate Morris, they're going head to head, but really Cameron's been spared some of the crossfire until today. So I prepped for the show yesterday. I wrote my notes out and everything else, but while I was gearing up to actually sit here before this camera, before this mic and talk to you, I noticed Nate Morris had tweeted out an attack on Daniel Cameron. So he's starting to get some fire there too from Nate Morris, but they've really been going at it. Cameron's been largely spared. Other thing, fun thing here, this is interesting. Cameron was the only one who said something about Hulk Hogan passing. Nate Morris nor Andy Barr said anything about it. Did they hate Hulk Hogan? I'm just kidding. I didn't say anything about Hulk Hogan passing either. I just found it interesting that Cameron did say something and the other candidates did not. I did find that interesting. So going into Fancy Farm, will they be prepared? Will they be able to handle the jostling, the catcalling, well, I want to call it catcalling because they're not, the crowd isn't hitting on them, jeering, heckling. Heckling, that's the word. Thank you, guys. That is heckling is what they will be doing there. And that's an interesting environment. Now, the weird thing is there's really not very many Democrats speaking at this. I think the only Democrat speaking is some random guy that's running against Comer. Normally, when I've gone to Fancy Farm, when I've watched Fancy Farm, you have one side of the pavilion that's Democrat, one side that's Republican. The candidates speak, and then each side kind of attacks each other. I don't know if you're really going to have that dynamic. I mean, the Democrats are apparently going hands-off on this, even though they're still doing their events before. Like, I think Bashir and Jacqueline Coleman are actually in the area like the same day or day before, but they're not showing up to Fancy Farm. So instead, will you end up getting just different camps of these Senate candidates all going at it? And with Nate Morris not running buses, will Nate Morris have a group there? Will he be thrown off? Will Cameron keep his cool? He's normally pretty good at Fancy Farm. Andy Barr's first time up. Will he flub? Will he choke? These are all questions that will be answered this Saturday. And if you want to check it out live, go ahead and watch us right here on WBNA. Listen to us on 970. I'll be on the ground doing live interviews. They'll be covering it here in the studio as well. But we'll see you back here tomorrow on Kentucky's Voice. Have a good day.